So how does Nick Reiner's history of drug use or mental health issues play into a possible defense, Lou?
It very much comes into it.
After Rob Reiner and his wife were gone, the reading of their final will did not bring resolution. It brought fracture. What was meant to close a chapter instead opened a deeper wound, one marked by confusion, anger, and questions no one was prepared to face. At the center of it stood their son, Nick Reiner. For years, he had been regarded quietly, often uncomfortably, as the most fragile and unpredictable member of the family. Now, he had been named the primary beneficiary of an estate valued near $200 million. Those close to the family said the decision was driven by fear more than favor, by a belief that Nick might not survive without protection. But that explanation only deepened the unease. Under California law, a person found responsible for intentionally harming a parent cannot inherit from them. Legal analysts, however, noted a narrow and unsettling complexity. Nick had been formally diagnosed with a mental disorder, and some experts suggested that such a diagnosis could complicate how intent is understood under the law. The questions that followed were quiet at first, almost reluctant. Did Nick know what the will contained? And if he did that knowledge weigh on his behavior in ways that are still not fully understood? These were not conclusions. They were doubts. But once raised, they could not be withdrawn. The rest of the family responded swiftly. Romy and Jake retained attorneys and challenged not only Nick's share, but the structure of the inheritance itself, including the portion left to Tracy, the adopted daughter. What followed was not a disagreement, but a rupture. Years earlier, Rob Reiner had told friends that his children were his lifeblood, that he had never loved anything more. Those words now lingered painfully as the siblings turned toward one another across legal filings, bound together by grief yet divided by fear, resentment, and money. Then came the moment that silenced the industry. On December 14, 2025, authorities were called to the family's Brentwood home. Within hours, it was reported that Nick had been taken into custody in connection with what occurred inside that house. Shock spread quickly, followed by a single, unavoidable question: what would happen to the estate? A state attorney explained that California's so-called Slayer statute exists to prevent anyone who intentionally causes harm from benefiting financially. If applied, the law would treat that person as though they had never been eligible to inherit at all, redistributing the estate among the remaining heirs. What unsettled even seasoned legal observers was not just the statute itself, but how it operates. It does not require a criminal conviction. A civil court need only determine that intent was more likely than not. That lower threshold changed everything, and with it came a final, destabilizing realization: if intent could not be clearly established, the law might not apply at all. In that uncertainty, the future of an entire legacy now hangs, suspended between grief, law, and what may never be fully known. According to legal analysis cited by Weiss Barr, the Slayer statute hinges on one central question: intent. If intent cannot be clearly established, the statute may not apply at all. In that narrow space, Nick's mental competency becomes pivotal. Should his legal team succeed in arguing that he was not mentally capable at the time, the legal barrier meant to prevent inheritance could fail. In that outcome, a court could determine, lawfully, that he remains eligible to inherit the estate in full. The possibility unsettled many. It raised difficult questions about where justice ends and legal definition begins, and whether the law is always equipped to carry the weight placed upon it. What followed only deepened the unease. The contents of Rob Reiner's final will surface publicly without warning, and the effect was immediate and jarring. Written roughly 2 years before Rob and Michelle's deaths, the document revealed a distribution few had anticipated. Friends and colleagues who believed they understood Rob's values were left silent, struggling to reconcile the man they knew with the choices laid out on the page. This was not a routine estate plan. It was deliberate, deeply personal, and impossible to ignore. According to reports, Rob left approximately 70% of his estimated $200 million fortune to Nick, an amount approaching $140 million. That share reportedly included ownership of copyrights tied to some of his most enduring work under Castle Rock Entertainment, along with long-standing royalty interests. Nick was also said to inherit the family's Brentwood home, the place where years of family life unfolded, and where everything ultimately came undone. The symbolism of that detail was hard to escape. Interpretations diverged sharply. Some believed Rob acted out of fear that time was running short, fear that his most vulnerable child would not be able to stand alone. Others saw a form of devotion that may have overlooked difficult realities. Either way, the document carried more than legal weight. It carried emotional consequence. The remainder of the estate was divided unevenly, a reported 20% to Tracy Reiner, and the final 10% split between Jake and Romy. The imbalance reopened long-standing wounds and brought unspoken resentments into the open. Mental health evidence, legal experts noted, could also serve as mitigation, compiled, examined, and presented not only to explain behavior, but to shape outcomes. How far that evidence might go remained uncertain. What was certain was the strain it placed on a family already fractured. One final element of the will lingered with particular force, a brief handwritten note from Rob himself. Few words, carefully chosen. He wrote that each child walks their own path, but that Nick would need the opportunities he could provide. To those who read it, the message felt less like favoritism and more like confession. It revealed a father defined by love and by fear that one of his children might not endure without his protection. That quiet admission, preserved in ink, became another fault line in a story shaped by legacy, responsibility, and the cost of trying to shield someone from a world that does not bend easily to care. For years, Rob and Michelle stood beside Nick as his life moved through cycles of collapse and recovery, efforts that faltered, careers that never quite took hold, long stretches marked by instability and dependence. There were moments when Nick had little left to rely on beyond his parents' presence. Friends would later say that Rob's deepest fear was never financial loss. It was the possibility of losing his son altogether. And so, in what he believed to be a final act of care, Rob made a decision rooted less in calculation than in urgency. He left Nick the largest share of the estate, hoping it might offer stability, structure, and one last opportunity to regain his footing. In Rob's mind, this was not preference. It was protection. That choice, born from love and fear intertwined, would become the fault line of one of the most painful family ruptures Hollywood has witnessed. Love, loyalty, and legacy collided, each pulling in a different direction. Rob understood that Nick was still struggling inwardly. His final words on the matter were brief, but weighted with concern. He wrote that he wanted Nick to have a chance to find his way back, to avoid repeating the same mistakes. Read now, those words carry the weight of desperation rather than greed, a father reaching for control in a situation that had long resisted it. The rest of the estate followed a different logic. Tracy Reiner, Rob's eldest daughter, was left roughly 20%, an amount meant to ensure comfort without burden. Rob believed she already had stability, family, responsibility, a life that did not hinge on financial rescue. The remaining portion was divided between Romy and Jake. He saw them as independent, capable of standing on their own. He had told them as much, reminding them that adulthood brought strength, but that his care for them remained, simply expressed in different ways. The Brentwood house left to Nick carried its own gravity. It was not merely a property, but a repository of memory, birthdays and arguments, ordinary nights and quiet joy, laughter alongside unresolved pain. Rob hoped it might anchor Nick, tie him to a sense of origin and continuity. Instead, once the will became public, the reaction was immediate and unforgiving. Many struggled to understand how such a vast portion of an empire, creative rights, financial power, the family home, could be entrusted to the son now linked to the family's darkest moment. Public debate turned sharp and restless. Psychologists weighed in cautiously, some suggesting that a lifelong pattern of rescue may have blurred boundaries, turning care into something more complicated. Others spoke of the risks of love without limits. Sympathy gradually shifted toward Jake and Romy, who had lived largely outside the spotlight and now found themselves pulled into a conflict they did not choose. Beneath the anger aimed outward, there was also a quieter sorrow directed inward, toward Rob himself, a father whose devotion may have obscured the consequences of his decisions. When the will was formally read on December 19, 2025, the abstract became personal. Jake Reiner was in Houston when the email arrived from the estate's management office. He read the numbers once, then again. The weight of it settled in his chest, heavy and unmistakable. In that moment, the story ceased to be about legacy alone. It became about absence, and the cost of choices made in fear, long before anyone understood how they would echo. 70% to Nick, 5% each to him and Romy. Jake stared at the screen, reading the numbers again, as if repetition might soften them. It didn't. He said quietly that this couldn't be real, that his father had promised fairness. The disbelief passed quickly, replaced by something harder to contain. Within hours, he canceled everything, booked the first available flight, and returned to Los Angeles. Whatever restraint he had maintained until that point was gone. Silence no longer felt possible. He went directly to Lyons and Associates, the firm the family had relied on for years. Inside the glass tower, the moment carried the weight of finality. Jake introduced himself and asked to see Teresa Lyons. This, he said, was about his father's will. Around the same time, District Attorney Nathan Hoffman spoke publicly about how cases involving families carry a particular kind of gravity, how loyalty, grief, and obligation pull people in opposite directions, leaving no one untouched. It was an observation shaped by experience, and one that already felt uncomfortably close to home. Teresa Lyons met Jake privately. Composed, deliberate, she told him she understood his pain. She explained that Rob's decisions had been guided by a desire to protect Nick, but that the circumstances now surrounding the case could alter everything. Jake listened, then answered without hesitation. Whatever his father's reasons had been, he said, no longer mattered. In his view, Nick had taken everything. He was prepared to fight. He authorized a civil challenge on the spot. Lyons brought in Mark Jericho, a seasoned attorney known for navigating bitter estate disputes. Their position was direct. The will did not account for the gravity of what had allegedly occurred, and the inheritance should be frozen until those questions were resolved. The next morning, Jake and Romy sat across from their legal team, documents spread across the table. One folder lay open in front of them, its label stark and impersonal. Romy fixed her eyes on the page showing the distribution. Her voice faltered as she asked why their father would do this, why Nick, after everything, would receive nearly all of it. Jake said he didn't understand either. He acknowledged their father's fear for Nick, but struggled to reconcile that concern with the scale of what had been left behind, including the house where everything had come apart. Romy's frustration turned outward. She questioned why Tracy received more than they did. The attorney answered evenly, explaining that under California law, an adopted child holds the same legal standing as a biological one. Challenging that would require proving that Rob lacked capacity when he wrote the will, a standard rarely met. The explanation did little to ease the tension. Romy struck the table and said plainly that no part of the estate should go to Nick, or to Tracy. Jake agreed. They instructed their attorneys to move forward, to freeze the estate, and to contest the distribution fully. With that decision, the conflict shifted from private grief to open confrontation. What had begun as disbelief hardened into resolve. The legal fight was no longer theoretical. It was underway, gathering momentum. And just as it seemed the situation had reached its limit, another development surfaced, one more name entering the dispute, signaling that the fracture was far from complete. Someone beyond the immediate lines of conflict soon stepped forward. Tracy Reiner had read the filings, absorbed the challenges, and understood what was at stake. She chose not to remain silent. That decision shifted the dispute into a more entrenched and unforgiving phase. Tracy retained her own legal counsel, moving quickly to defend the portion of the estate left to her. To her, the matter was not abstract. It was personal. She framed her position not around entitlement, but history. As the eldest, she said she had been present through years of strain, supporting her parents, easing tension between siblings, trying to hold the family together when it was quietly coming apart. To question her share felt, to her, like a rejection of that role. Within hours, she hired David O. Carter, a widely respected inheritance attorney. His response was measured but firm. He notified opposing counsel that continued efforts to challenge Tracy's portion would be met with immediate legal resistance. The will, he argued, should stand as written, aside from any temporary questions surrounding Nick's share. As an adopted child, Tracy held the same legal standing as any other heir. The law made no distinction. What had begun as a private reckoning now expanded into open confrontation. Three positions hardened. Nick's future remained uncertain. Jake and Romy pressed forward in the name of fairness. Tracy stood her ground, determined to protect what she believed was rightfully hers. Court filings multiplied. Legal teams worked behind closed doors. Outside, reporters waited, and the public watched closely, dividing along familiar lines, some defending legacy, others defending loyalty. Yet beneath the noise, a quieter truth remained. Those closest to Rob and Michelle said this was never the ending they imagined. Their deepest hope had always been unity, family, above all else. Rob was known not just for his public life, but for his presence at home, showing up through doubt, failure, and uncertainty. He reminded his children that they would always be heard, always supported. That was not rhetoric. It was how he lived. For Nick, that care ran especially deep. Even in moments of chaos, Rob believed that love could stabilize what seemed unsteady. Now, that belief stood in painful contrast to what was unfolding. A family shaped by patience and devotion was being pulled apart in full view. Even Tracy, caught between defense and grief, acknowledged that the battle ran against everything her parents had taught them. The loss was overwhelming, compounded by the weight of impossible decisions and unanswered questions. She remembered Rob repeating the same words over the years: family comes first. Protect one another. Do not let money eclipse what matters most. Those words now linger in conference rooms and court filings, present but powerless, echoing through arguments they were meant to prevent. As the focus narrows, attention settles on Nick Reiner. His demeanor, calm, controlled, has unsettled observers. Despite the gravity of the situation, he appears composed, prepared. Then came another development that deepened the unease. Nick retained Alan Jackson, a formidable defense attorney known for representing some of the most prominent figures in the city. The decision raised immediate questions. How such representation was secured remains unclear. What is known is that Nick's legal strategy centers on mental health, seeking not only to explain responsibility, but to shape what remains of his future. If successful, that argument could reach beyond the criminal case, touching the very foundation of the inheritance itself. The possibility that a single defense could influence both accountability and fortune has unsettled many. And as that realization sets in, the sense grows that what lies ahead may be even more difficult than what has already been revealed. Some who have followed the case closely believe Nick understood the law well enough to foresee where it might lead, that his diagnosis could serve not only as explanation, but as insulation. If that reading holds, it suggests something more deliberate than first assumed. What appeared to be disorder may, in part, have been preparation shaped by fear, desperation, or self-preservation. Investigators have pointed to early legal payments traced to assets under Nick's control, raising the possibility that financial positioning began long before everything unraveled. That suggestion alone has left many unsettled. It challenges the assumption that vulnerability and intent exist on opposite ends of the same spectrum. The reaction has been conflicted and uneasy. Psychologists remain divided. Some see a life marked by instability, describing a person both wounded and unpredictable, shaped by years of internal struggle. Others point to patterns that feel too organized to ignore. Between those interpretations, the boundary between illness and manipulation has grown increasingly difficult to define. Even seasoned experts hesitate. The question of where compassion yields to accountability no longer has clear edges. As the focus widens, attention returns to the legacy Rob Reiner spent decades building. His fortune, estimated near $200 million, was not accidental. It was earned through sustained creative influence and relentless work. From his early success on All in the Family, through a directing career that helped define modern American film, Rob shaped stories that endured across generations. He co-founded Castle Rock Entertainment, a company whose projects became cultural touchstones, and whose success secured a financial foundation that continued to grow long after he stepped back from daily production. Royalties flowed steadily, year after year, carrying his work forward. Beyond film, there was real estate. The Brentwood home was more than an asset. It was a record of family life, quiet routines, celebrations, conflict, and memory layered over decades. Purchased in the early 90s, it stood as both the emotional center of the family and a visible marker of success. A beachfront property in Malibu Colony added another dimension, generating income while reinforcing the scope of what Rob had built. Piece by piece, he constructed not just wealth, but security, a system designed to protect his family long after he was gone. Now, that same structure has become the source of fracture. What began as an expression of care has hardened into division. The story has shifted from one of creative achievement to a cautionary reckoning about legacy. Love, once the family's anchor, has become the ground on which everything is contested. Whether Rob's compassion blinded him, or whether generosity carried risks no one could fully anticipate, remains unresolved. What is clear is that even the strongest bonds can strain under the combined weight of grief, money, and unanswered questions. And for a family built on the belief that love was enough, that realization may be the most difficult legacy of all.